Let's do an experiment. We want to separate a couple of things in our petri dish, and um, there's a few conditions that have to be established before we can really pull this experiment off in a way that's credible and reliable and reportable to the science world. And one of those things is to understand the characteristics and the behavior of A and B. If we're going to separate them, the best way to do that is understand them so deeply that we know what they do in certain conditions, and if we can set up a controlled environment with both of them in it, and we know enough about them to know some of the things that they always respond to, then maybe we can find something that A always responds one way and B always responds the other way, and we would introduce a catalyst into that environment. And with that catalyst, it would be a true catalyst if it stirred up that behavior, and naturally they separate. And that's how a science experiment works. So let's do that experiment, but we're going to be father and son for a minute. And we're looking for A in the heavenlies. This is Father and Son in the heavenlies, the Father and the Son. And so we're looking at to separate A from B, because we are intending to spend all eternity. When the clock runs out, it never runs out in eternity. We're looking to spend all eternity with a certain select group of people out of all of humanity. And how do we select that people? Well, we separate them. And that's what Jesus says refers to when he says that he, in John 9:39, that he came to bring judgment. Well, in other places he says, I didn't come to judge you, but in this case he says, he's referring to light, and he's saying that in effect, my light is going to be the judge, my word is going to be the judge. And when my light comes, how exactly does that affect certain behaviors between A and B? So he's come to separate. He's come to separate. And that's what this experiment is about. So the controlled environment is complete darkness, because what is true about A and B are true enough to make this experiment okay, or this process okay in the heart of God. Is A loves the light, and B runs from the light, prefers the darkness. One prefers the light and one prefers the darkness. And so your controlled environment is the world that we live in, which is total darkness. And there's a certain degree of comfort with the darkness in some people, and a certain degree of misery and discomfort with the darkness in others. Jesus Christ entered the world and brought light. And light brought not only comfort and light and truth to those that it received it, but it also created a behavior that that allowed him to separate, because the catalyst comes into the controlled environment, darkness, and A behaves one way and B behaves the other. They separate, and then A becomes the ones that will live forever in the heavenly kingdom. So we see this several times throughout the scriptures, not just one time, but Jesus says he came to separate, and this is how he pulled it off. The world was dark, and that's our controlled environment, and the catalyst is the light. A behaves one way, B behaves the other, and so he says, truly, it's a heart thing. It's a heart thing as to whether you prefer the light or you prefer the darkness. He didn't talk about, did you make last Wednesday night service? Do you, this first cut, then you enter into discipleship, but still, this first cut is in your heart. Do you prefer the light prefer the darkness.